Welcome to The Jewish Lens, a podcast to discuss anything and everything from a Jewish perspective. Now, please help me welcome the man who controls the media, your host, Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and today I am thrilled to welcome an acclaimed author of several books, including his latest, The Delegation. Please help me welcome Avner Landes. Avner, thanks so much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Well, we have a lot to cover, but I want to start by going back with you. So, where were you born, and what was your family life like, especially with regard to Judaism?
I was born in Washington, D.C., although my family lived in Potomac just for a few years, and then we moved to Silver Spring.
Been all over.
But what?
You've been all over.
I've been all over, yeah, but I mean, I wouldn't even say I grew up in Silver Spring. I mean, when I was 9, my family moved back to Chicago, and we're just a real old time Chicago family. I mean, my family's been in Chicago for over 100 years.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, just a real old time Chicago family. So really, my family was going back to Chicago. That's where I grew up. I grew up in Skokie. I mean, Chicago, Skokie. I grew up in Skokie. Um,
Oh, I know that
yeah,
that town well from from I was a kid when that whole thing happened in Skokie, but yes,
yeah, that's right. That's what it's
yeah.
famous for. Yeah, I grew up in a modern Orthodox household. I went to day schools my entire life. So yeah, I'd say typical modern Orthodox upbringing. Yeah.
So I just now curious. So were you a big reader as a kid also?
Was I a big reader as a kid? Yeah, I mean, I would say I was a big reader. I wouldn't say I was one of those like a bookish kid necessarily, although, books were really, important in my house. We always had, tons of books. My parents were big readers. We always got like millions of different magazines sent to the house. Of all different types. Like I always thought it was, I mean, now, especially when I reflect on it, my father he would get the Weekly Standard and the New Republic. Like that's and I remember him always kind of saying it's like you got to read every side.
Yes.
Some people would say that's both the same side, but I don't know. But yeah, I really kind of grew up in that house. A lot of I'd say curiosity, a lot of reading, a lot of newspaper reading.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I always loved reading as a kid. Definitely. I'd say like most teenagers, I got into music. I was very into music as a teenager. Probably wasn't reading as much, but we kept Shabbat. I think when you keep Shabbat, you
Right.
kind of end up reading a lot more.
So
Uh,
you have any like favorite books as a kid that that stood out to you?
yeah, I probably just read all the kind of, I mean, especially when I was a young kid, I probably read all these traditional series like Encyclopedia Brown and the Hardy Boys and all that. Um, but then, yeah, but then I'd say when I kind of became a teenager, I wasn't reading books that much. I was reading, Sports Illustrated. I was reading, I was very into politics always, even as a teenager. So I was reading a lot of magazines, newspapers, Rolling Stone, very into Rolling Stone and Spin. I was crazy into music as a teenager. So,
Any favorite band?
uh, wow, that's a tough one. I mean, I don't know. I'd say the band I go back to the most, honestly, is REM. That's definitely. But yeah, I listen to a lot of different music. My brother's a huge Fish fan, so I've kind of, I'm very into Fish. I go to a lot of shows. I used to go to a lot of shows. Yeah.
So, REM. My favorite REM song is like not even one of their most popular one. I love the song "Tongue." It's my favorite song.
Oh yeah, yeah, great song. Yeah.
But so when did you first start taking an interest in writing?
So yeah, I definitely wasn't really ever that into writing. I mean, I when I went to university, I was studying political science.
Mm.
I went to university in Israel. I was studying political science, and I don't know. I guess just growing a little bored with political science. It kind of didn't make that much sense to me in a certain sense. Um, and I was sitting in a class called Brazilian History 1500 to 1950. It was a 4 hour lecture. There were seven of us in the class. And yeah, I just remember very distinctly, like I just started writing fiction in the middle
Is
of
it so?
class.
It was as exciting as it sounds right now.
Yeah, I mean, I was so incredibly bored, and I think when it was, when it's seven kids in a class, the professor is really
Right.
just staring at the seven of you, and so I always felt like I had to be writing, that I
Okay.
was always taking notes, but I was so tuned out to what the professor was saying, I just started writing fiction because I just wanted to look like I was writing notes and I was kind of daydreaming, and I just found I was writing stories. And then at that point, I kind of realized I don't really know what I'm doing writing these
You didn't
stories.
write as a kid. You didn't like writing as a kid. This came much late. This came later when you were in college already.
Yeah, maybe like a little here and there. I mean, I was always a very creative kid. Like, I mean, I was very
Mhm.
into music. Like at a period where I was into, making comic books. I would, I mean, this sounds really kind of nerdy, but as a as a real little kid, I would write like reports. I would look up encyclopedia articles and write reports. Uh, so I kind of always had in my head, I liked, I did like writing. I liked being creative. I liked creative projects of sorts, but never fiction writing. That was never really a thing for me until I was like, yeah,
Well,
22 or so. Yeah.
what was the fiction that you were writing in class? What was it?
God, I don't even remember. I don't even know where it is. I don't know if I ever even really like completed a story. I was kind of writing these shorts. It became very apparent to me right away that I'm not quite I kind of don't really know what I'm doing. Um, but also that I want to figure this out. Like I want to get deeper into this world. And that's when I started reading. And then it was
Mhm.
really kind of off to the races for me. I
Well, you
mean,
said so. You felt that you weren't sure what you were doing in fiction. So what did you do then? What did you do to try to better yourself? Did you start studying? You start taking classes with someone?
yeah, I just started reading like fiction. I mean,
Mhm.
until that point, I was reading mostly nonfiction. I was very into political philosophy, so I was reading a lot of political philosophy. I was a little into like economics, and so, but then I really hadn't read that much fiction. I mean, in high school you read kind of all the classics and stuff, but at age 22 or so, I started like going through all of Roth and going through all of Bellow, and yeah, I would say those were like the two big ones for me
I
at
saw
that
that
point.
I saw where you said that Saul Bellow was a major influence on your writing, and subsequently, your work has been compared to his. So, what is it
Uh,
about his writing that inspired you?
um, I mean, I think in a very plain sense, when as a 22-year-old, when was reading Roth and reading Bellow, I mean, it was yeah, this revelation for me that wow, like people are writing about Jews and they're writing about how Jews live, and
Yeah.
certainly, they had me thinking about, my parents, my grandparents, and hearing a lot of this kind of the same stories that I was told as a kid, and just it felt right, like just had all that same tone that I kind of the same tone of the stories I grew up hearing from my parents. But also on top of that, I think just the humor was really kind of a big deal for me. Like, wow, this is so funny and so smart. And it just kind of felt, yeah, it just kind of felt like like a worldview, right? Like it felt like it was my worldview. I mean, I don't think we share like the same particular necessarily worldview, but the same way of approaching the world. Approaching the world through language and through
Okay.
story. That really kind of did it for me. Yeah.
And,
And then I
and
started taking classes. Yeah, I started taking, writing workshops and stuff.
uh-huh. So, anyone else had a major influence on you?
I mean, through the years, yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know, constantly I find myself like find new writers, but I'd say when I started, it was definitely the big Jewish writers, but then also like Leonard Michaels and Bruce J. Friedman were,
Hmm.
two other Jewish writers that were just huge, huge for me. And then like a few years later, when I was getting my MFA, I was back in America. I was getting my MFA at Columbia.
Ask about
One of my teachers introduced me to Stanley Elkin, the Jewish writer Stanley Elkin, and that was he was really became really important to me.
so.
But I don't know, like it's amazing. I still find it's amazing. Like, this is already I've been writing for 20 something years. And this past year, for example, I got crazy into Cynthia Ozick, who is someone when I was younger, like I had a really hard time connecting to.
Yes.
Just a little too like intellectual for me, and a little didact felt a little didactic at times. And then I don't know, like I ended up with the Cynthia Ozick book like a year ago, and I've just been going through all of them, and like now she's a huge influence on my work now, I think.
That
So
happens
yeah.
a lot. Like, you're a kid, you're like, oh, I'm not, how does anyone like this? And then, oh, now I get it when you get to
Yeah. Yeah.
the
And
movie.
sometimes it's the reverse. I read like last year, I read the Joseph Heller book, Something Happened.
Okay.
And God, that book like blew my mind. I just love that book so much, and I was really and then I was saying to myself, I've never read Catch 22, you know? How have I never read Catch 22? So I went and read it, and the whole time I'm reading Catch 22, I just have this thought of, man, I would have loved this book as a 24-year-old. It's just, it was fine. It was fine. But again, that feeling of like at that, like if I had read this in my early 20s, I really would have thought this was the greatest book ever.
Right.
But I'm just kind of like at the wrong stage right now
Yeah,
for
yeah,
it.
that happens as well. So you said that I was going to ask you about that anyway. You brought it up. You went to Columbia. What were your experiences like at Columbia when you went?
It was great. It was amazing. I mean, you know, I don't know, like, yeah, I mean, now people talk about everything that's happening there. I mean, certainly it seems things have changed. And I think but maybe before everything that's been going on the last, year and a half, I think a lot depended on where you were studying, which part of the university you were studying in, right? I mean, if you're studying in the humanities or especially in the history departments, you probably would have a very different experience than someone studying, um, in the business school or right. I mean, sure, there was stuff on campus here and there, but I don't know. It never really bothered me. I never felt intimidated. It was always small groups. I
Mhm.
mean, I think that's changed obviously in the in,
So
in the last year and
so
a
when
half.
you see what's going on there now, I mean, goes through your mind? Because I look back at, I went to college in New York as well. I went to Brooklyn College, and
Mm.
I see like incidents happening there now, and like I don't even recognize it. It's like, it's like a completely different school to me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's certainly really depressing to see, right? I mean, it's very depressing. I mean, I have, friends that teach there, so I've heard a lot of just stories about things that
Right,
happen, and they're, disgusting things that happen, disturbing things,
right.
and then of course you read in the paper about things that happen, and yeah, listen, I when I went there, it felt like such a inviting environment. I
Yeah,
mean,
same. Right.
I'd come from Israel, and obviously, and it was never like an issue. It was never, and it wasn't. That's not to say I didn't know what the feelings were of some of the people there and what their opinions were, but it was never. I was never abused in any way, as which is clearly what's happening now, or at least a lot of how a lot of students feel now, especially.
Yeah, oh, yeah,
I
absolutely.
never, yeah, I
Benji,
never experienced.
so you're a writer now. You're like, that's what you do now as a job, as a career. You're a writer, right? So what did you do initially though, right out of like, college? What was your career path then?
Well, listen, I don't my books, they don't sell they don't sell to the degree that I can sit and write my fiction all day, unfortunately. Um I wish like that's I mean the truth is in this day and age, I don't know really any writers and you'd be surprised I mean, I know writers who have won some of the biggest prizes in fiction, and they still have to, work day jobs. I mean, the that's
Reality.
the reality. Yeah. But so really, since pretty much since I've always been doing a lot of teaching.
Mhm.
I used to teach EFL, English as a foreign language.
Okay.
But I'd say in like the last decade, I was a ghostwriter for many years.
I saw, right.
Uh, I was a ghostwriter for many years, and I don't do too much ghostwriting anymore. Now I do mostly developmental editing. People give me their novels. I tell them how to fix it up, or I give them suggestions. Yeah.
So we talked a little bit. I mean, you live in Israel now,
Mhm.
but you grew up in this. What made you move? What prompted you to go and say, "This is it. I want to move there now."
Um, Well, yeah, like I said, a big part of my family is like from Chicago, but another part of my family are Israeli. I mean, they came here in 1820. So I have a large family in Israel. And listen, I think I'm part of it. I'm a creature of habitat. Like I get to a place and I just stay. Um,
So you didn't go out
and
with the idea of moving. You went just for a visit and say, "I'm staying."
Yeah, I mean, I came, after high school, like people do. I came to study in yeshiva, and yeah, I don't know, I just felt like really comfortable here, and I just kind of felt like this is where I want to be. I can't, I can't describe it past a level of like comfort that I've always felt. And I mean, I spent 10 years in New York when I was I stayed, went to get my MFA, ended up staying for 10 years, but we always knew we were going to come back.
Right.
Uh, and still, I don't know. I just feel very comfortable here. I
You,
just,
you and
I
I spoke
just,
before we started recording a little bit, and I
yeah,
said that's my fear now with my daughter that she's going to say, "Oh, I love it here. I'm not coming home."
yeah,
She's studying there. So was it difficult or to acclimate at all to say, because it's one thing to visit, and I lived in Israel
yeah.
as a kid too. So
Uh,
is it difficult then to acclimate there, saying, "Okay, once I'm here now living, how is that?"
yeah. I mean, listen, it's excuse me, it's definitely hard. I mean, being an immigrant, I think anywhere is
Mhm.
difficult. Whether you're an immigrant in the United States, it's difficult for different reasons. For me, I think it is, the language is difficult. I mean, I'd say I'm pretty fluent, but there's still, it's like a cultural language. You never feel 100%. You always, you are always aware that you're somewhat of an outsider. Um, and in some ways, it's really that makes it difficult, but in some ways, I really find it makes life easier. Especially I think as a writer, it's just kind of easier for me to kind of get into myself, get into my own head, be in my own head most of the time. Um, I am, I'm like a pretty extroverted person. I'm pretty gregarious. When I was in New York, like my kid's school, I was like the mayor, I knew everyone, I knew all the teachers. And here I get to my kid's school and it's like I want nothing to, I don't want to do like talk to anyone. I don't want to uh and I
That's a
kind
lot
of
of writers, by the way, of that way.
yeah. And it's in a certain sense I feel it's been better for my work, kind of being an outsider, being able to kind of just stick to myself and be in my own head and not, yeah.
Is
Not being like to check my extroverted self.
is there a big writing community where you are?
There is a pretty large community. I mean, first of all, listen, in the community where I live, there's a lot of Anglos, so it's not
Hmm.
like I'm a lone English speaker
Right.
in my community. We have a lot of good friends who are English speakers. Um, I teach a workshop. I've been teaching a workshop for a few years now, a writing workshop, and it's in English. English people writing in English, all very talented writers.
Hmm.
Uh, with the university, with Bar Ilan, there's big English program there. So yeah, there's a large community here. Some very fine writers. It's a nice community. But I don't know. As I get older, I have less of a need for community. I think that's. I mean, there's just less time, right? It's like when you're in your 20s, you kind of need these people to hold you, to kind of hold you up because
Or,
you're doing this
right.
crazy,
Yes.
crazy thing of trying to become a writer. And everyone in your life is kind of telling you you're crazy, you're crazy. So you kind of need these people to give you, you need to support each other. But, when you have kids and you're working, it's like you just want to go and sit and write when you have time.
Yes.
Uh,
Oh,
and I have the community when it's there, and I try to be a part of it, and it is nice, but I wouldn't say it's as important to me as it was, 20 something years
I'm with
ago.
you. I feel very much the same.
Yeah.
Yes. So,
Yeah,
so
right. I don't know.
tell me about your path to publication. Before we get to the delegation, your new book, you had another book. I'm so hoping that Meiselman, the Lean Years. Can you tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about that book?
Yeah, so My Some in the Lean Years came out of a book I started writing during my MFA, near the tail end of my MFA. Um, I was it was interesting, I came from Israel, and when I started the writing program at Columbia, I kind of felt this need to write all these Israel stories.
Okay.
Some of them were about the army, and I don't know, I felt like that was my role. And I just hated those stories. I didn't enjoy working on them. I mean, partly because they weren't very good. But again, I think I was also felt like had to be a certain type of writer. And then near the end of my time there, I just started writing this book. And the truth is, I was really stuck. I had a submission to do. I got pretty drunk one night, and I just kind of let loose a very new style, very new subject matter. And I was really off to the races with this book. But the book took me around 6.5 years until I had a solid, I'd say until I was pretty much done with it. And then that book took a while to sell. It took a few years until I was able to sell it. And
Did you get an agent first, or you sold it on your own?
yeah, so I think I would say my style is a little bit maybe quirky. I don't know. That's how it's been described by people. Slightly experimental, I would say. A
Hmm.
little, I don't know. I hate these labels, but I was trying to get an agent for a while, and it was, getting interest here and there. But I mean, maybe, you know how it is. It's like, we really like the first 30 pages. Can you send us the rest of the book? We love it. We love it. You'll be hearing from us in 6 to 12 months. And you're like, did you really love it that much? That's going to take you another six
That's
to
publishing.
12.
Yes.
It's going to take you another 6 to 12 months to finish this book that you just love. I mean, uh, and then finally, someone I know, another writer, read the book, and he's like, "Your book is not big publishing material. Like, you need to find a small press for your book." And then, really, when I started sending it out to small presses, I just started having a lot more success. And then I finally landed with my first publisher, and
You did it all without an
yeah.
agent. You went yourself and got the first one.
Yeah, yeah, I went myself, and it was great. Yeah, like I really had a really great. Um, there's a funny story actually. I had someone set me up with an agent here in Israel, and I sent him the manuscript, and he said, "Oh, I really like this manuscript. Let's have a meeting." And I thought, oh my God, I was like on cloud nine. I mean, I from the time he told me let's have the meeting until we had the meeting, I just couldn't sleep. What should I wear? What should I, And on top of it, my parents happened to be in town at the time, and I'm like, this is just, um, and I go to the meeting, and even when I go to the meeting, there's like all these other writers who are like kind of walking around the agency, and
Oh, you
we
went
sit
at
down
the
for the
agency? Okay.
Yes, I went to the agency. It's an agent, good agency in Jerusalem.
Mhm.
Some people I'm sure will know which agency I'm talking about. Um, and I met with the agent there, and he said, "Yeah, I like the book, but I have a bunch of suggestions for you to make." And he starts just giving me like suggestion after suggestion of like fix this, fix that. And I was like, I don't really agree with that. I don't agree with that. And he gave me, I'd say, 20 different edits.
Notes, right.
And I agreed with like three of them. And so I went back and I like three of them I really thought like these are solid edits. Like these makes a lot of sense to me. And I fixed those three things and I felt so great about the book then. I felt like those three things really kind of turned the book around for me in a wonderful way. And I sent it back to him. He's like, "You didn't make any of the edits I suggested." He's like, "No, no, pass." But then when I started sending the book out after that, I really started getting a lot of interest. And I think it was like within 3 or 4 months, I signed my contract. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Let's talk about the delegation because before we even go into the structure of the book, which is unbelievable to me, we'll talk about that in a second.
Oh, cool,
Just
cool.
tell me about the basic plot of the book for the people watching.
The plot is very simple. I mean, it's historical fiction. The year is 1943, and Joseph Stalin decides to send a delegation of two Jewish artists on a world tour to rally support for the Soviet Union and for the Red Army. He wants to rally political support, but he also wants to raise money. And it really all stems from Stalin's anti-Semitic notion that the Jews control the world. And, at that point, Stalingrad, the Soviets had kind of, turned the tide, but there's a lot of fighting ahead of them. They needed money. They needed the United States to join the war in a very forceful way. And he thought, well, I'll send Jews to get the money and to convince the United States to enter the war more forcefully. So he wants to send a celebrity who is this famous actor, Shlomi Michels, who is, the arguably the biggest actor of the Soviet Union at the time, and just the one of the biggest actors in the world, and especially in the Yiddish theater. And he's done a lot of movies. So he's the draw. But the problem with Michels is that Michels sort of sees himself as the head Jew of the Soviet Union, and he's not a party member. He's someone who really wants to help solve the Jewish question in the Soviet Union. So Stalin doesn't really trust Michels to go on a world tour by himself. So he sends along with him a poet named Itzik Pfeffer. And Itzik Pfeffer is a not very good poet who's a propagandist, who is a party member, and his job is to act as Michael's minder to make sure that, Michael stays on message.
On task, right?
Uh, and it's a buddy comedy with a terribly tragic ending.
Well, don't
Everyone
spoil
dies.
things. Well, okay, so let's talk about the structure because I,
Yeah,
I saw someone in all your reviews compared it to the Choose Your Own Adventure books. Those
yeah,
were my favorite books growing up. It's not
yeah. Oh,
exactly
yeah,
that. Yeah, I'm even to this day, I can go back and read them occasionally, and I feel like I'm a kid again. I love those books.
for
So,
sure.
yeah, it's not exactly that, but I can see the point. So,
Yeah.
please describe the structure because really, this book can be read 3 times at least with someone getting new information and perspective each time.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, since there's a video component, I could, show the book to people. So basically, there's three stories that run concurrently
Right.
throughout the book. Each page is divided into three sections, and I'll just show it to you. And for anyone who's looking at the video, um, there's the top section, which is the
Which is
main
the
story,
story.
and this
Right.
this is the story of Pfeffer and Michels traveling to America. And I should say the main story really only covers the first week of the trip, leading up to a rally in the Polo Grounds. The middle section is a note from the author who is the supposed author of the top section, and his name is Izzy Schenkenberg. He's actually a character from my first book. So he's writing this note to the reader, and it basically covers all his anxiety about writing Jewish fiction, Jewish historical fiction. Um, and it just has a lot of his thoughts about Jewish fiction in general, but a lot of it's about his anxiety of how do I write historical fiction. And then the bottom section are footnotes to the note from the author. And that really, we get a lot more about Schenkenberg's life and I would say, the stories he really wants to be writing about. Yeah.
Because I was going through this book, I was like, you could easily become engrossed in the bottom sections and forget to go back to
Yeah, yeah.
the main part. So I was like, this, I'd never seen anything like this. So what inspired you to write it that way? Because I don't recall Saul Bellow ever doing a choose your own adventure book. So what inspired you to do this?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say in recent years, I've just kind of gotten, in general, just more interested in kind of in books with interesting structures. There's a great book by this Spanish writer Julio Cortázar called Hopscotch, where his book, it's really like a hopscotch. You read one section, and then the book tells you now go to chapter 52, and when you finish chapter 52, it tells you to go to chapter 33. The interesting thing with that book, though, is it also tells you in the beginning you don't have to skip around if you don't want to. You could actually read the book straight through. So at the beginning, the reader is presented with this question: do you want
Wow,
to hopscotch through the book, or do you just want to read it, straight through?
that
Um,
went up. Okay.
that's what I was reading, I would say. But
Okay.
how it happened was a lot more, I'd say, organically. I mean, I was writing this work of historical fiction about Pfeffer and Michels, and then I would write, 20, 30 pages, and then all of a sudden I kind of found myself writing this other story about a writer who's struggling to write this story of Pfeffer Michels. Um, and I really like that. I really like both stories. So then at some point I also started to see they kind of play off each other in this really interesting way. Um, so I had like, well, how could I merge these two stories together? And I came up with this idea of having these three sections, but Microsoft Word doesn't allow you to do this. Uh, so it was really just in my head. And then, so yeah, like when I started sending it out to publishers, I would kind of explain to them what I envisioned. The document they were reading was kind of, they'd read the top section, they'd read 30 pages of that, and then the next section would be the letter. So they were like, we don't, a lot of people were like, I don't understand what the
What
heck
you
you're
do?
doing. Yeah. So then I finally just paid like an interior layout guy to do like the first 20 pages just so people could understand what I was doing. And that was the first time I'd actually ever seen it, what it looks like. And I was really relieved because, like, okay, this looks good. I like the way it works. And honestly, one of the things I'm really surprised about so far with the book is that people really find it fun, you know?
Yeah,
The
it absolutely is. So once
Yeah.
you paid the layout person and you started sending out again, you had much more interest right away.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, right then I would say I had like three kind of publishing options. I mean, two of them I
Wow.
was, but then there was one I was really more excited about. So I would say also one of the three was not that jazzed about the layout. Uh, I would say actually my publisher also at some point he's like, "Are we sure about this?" And I was like, "Yeah." I'm like, "This is non-negotiable. Trust me, it's gonna be great."
Well, how difficult was it for you to keep track of everything? Like, I'm you have three different stories almost. Like, so how difficult was it for you to keep track of everything? And how long did this take for you to complete, just from start to finish?
Yeah, this one, I mean, like I said, my first book took me like 6.5 years. I mean, it's significantly longer. This one was relatively fast. It took me start to finish, I'd say till I had like pretty much a final draft was like 3.5 years. Um, yeah, in terms of keeping it straight, yeah, that was I wouldn't say the tricky part. I mean, I think with every book, I always tell my students this. I think it's like this with a short story, and it's like this with a novel. It's like the first 90%, you're like, this is ridiculous. This makes no sense. What am I doing here? This doesn't work. And then really when you hit like that around that 90% mark, you start to see like, oh no, this is a book. And you could kind of then at that point, you see the end. You're like, okay, and yeah, I see like how the last couple chapters are gonna look, and I have a book. At least that's what it's like for me when I write. And with this one, it was very much like that. I mean, I was just writing and writing. I was going up and back between sections, and I was like, what is this? What am I doing here? But I liked it. Like I really enjoyed it.
You had fun doing it?
I had so much fun doing it. I mean, for me, I guess the key is always when I started writing this book, I was actually in the middle of writing a different novel that I'd spent like 2.5 years on,
Hmm.
and I absolutely hated that book. Like I hated it. I hated working on it. I hated looking at the thing. Uh,
Been there.
and then you should never feel that way about a project,
Right.
And this one I liked. Like I always liked it. I always found it fun. So yeah, then at some point it kind of how it all came together, I could like see it all of a sudden. And that was right when I got pretty close to the end.
I've
Yeah.
said that to students as well. If you're pushing yourself to do something, chasing a trend, like someone's telling you you have to do this and you're not enjoying it, it's going to show up in the work. You have to you're spending so much time, like you said, even for you, like years, you have to enjoy it to be able
Yeah.
to, pour yourself into it.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, it's like I think that's book I was working on. It was like an imitation of my first book. And I
Mhm.
think in my mind it was like, well, I got validation for that first book. I mean, it was published and people liked it, so let's just do it again. Let's walk it back. And it was like the B-sides. It was that's kind of like how I
No,
felt
like
writing it.
like I said, very, very entertaining. I was going when I was going through your book, I was like, oh wow, look at all the three different sections, and you could easily forget to go back to the main story because you're so
Yeah.
engrossed in the other two. So it was really a lot of fun, and I definitely
Oh, cool.
recommend it
Thank
to
you.
people. So
Oh, thank you.
what are you working on next?
What am I working on next? Yeah, I started writing a new novel. Yeah, and again, I think this time starting out, I had more a clearer sense of like, let's try something completely different. And I even at some point I started thinking about some nifty structure, and I'm like, no, 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 I did the nifty structure already. Like that's done. But I think with all my writing, I try to kind of set a new challenge for myself, like something that seems a difficult type of book to write.
Mhm.
Um, Not to read, but to write. And I did that, I think, with the new one. But again, as I said, it's like it feels kind of like a mess, but I just have to
Early
keep faith
stages.
that, yeah, keep faith that it's just, it's gonna come together at some point. So, yeah,
And
I'm
and
excited.
the most important question, how can people follow you on social media?
Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm still on X, Twitter, but it's really kind of dead there. I'd say the best place to follow me now is either follow me on Facebook.
Okay.
Avner Landes on Facebook or Insta. I like doing Instagram. It's very pleasant and not too anti-Semitic. Uh,
I find it different. You know what? You mentioned Twitter because I'm a writer and I followed. I don't even see writing posts anymore. All I see is what I engage with, which is like other Jewish accounts right now.
Right.
And so that's my when I go on my feed, that's the majority of the things that I see. So it's not too bad for me right now.
Yeah, but I'll be honest. Like it's interesting. It used to be the algorithm was designed to like kind of keep you in your a bubble.
Right.
And I think the algorithm now has almost been tweaked. It wants you to engage. Like the amount of anti-Semitic tweets I'm fed now, I would say over the last month is staggering.
Well,
Like
I get
they
that.
must know Jewish
Yeah.
Jewish guy living in Israel, and they're
I get that a lot for this podcast thing. No matter what, I could post
really,
anything. Just talking to not let you live in Israel, so it gives them the extra. But I could just post about someone writing a children's book, and I'll get all the anti-Semitic comments
really.
underneath it. Just doesn't have to be.
Wow.
It's
Yeah.
incredible. But
Yeah.
I want to thank you for coming on. Like I said again, the book is The Delegation. It's a
Thank
lot
you.
of fun. I definitely recommend everyone go out to get it. And but again,
Appreciate it.
thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Well,
Appreciate it.
again, this has been the Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and again, a very special thanks to Avner Landes. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thanks for tuning in to The Jewish Lens, where all items used was strictly kosher.